All right, welcome to the November 1st regular meeting of the Ann Arbor Planning Commission. For detailed information on the meeting procedures, please review the full printed meeting agenda as provided. Ms. Kelly, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Lee.
Here.
Commissioner Abrams.
Here.
Commissioner Weiss.
Here.
Commissioner Mills.
Here.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt has noted she will be absent this evening. Councilmember Dish.
Here.
Commissioner Salve.
Here.
Commissioner Clark. Commissioner Weatherby.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Moving on to approval of the agenda, may I have a motion to approve? Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner White. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Minutes of the previous meeting. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the October 17th? Commissioner Mills and Councilmember Dish. Is there any discussion of the minutes? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing no one, the motion carries. Next up are the reports of the Planning Commission and written communication. Councilmember Dish, I'm going to start with you.
No report because council hasn't met since the last time we did.
Oh, thank you. Mux Kelly, do you have any report?
I do. I would, first of all, like to introduce the person who is sitting to my right. First day for our new planning services intern, Jonathan Arntzen. So please give a welcome to Jonathan. They will be shadowing staff and learning about the Planning Commission through the meeting this evening. You also have a comprehensive plan update from Planning Manager Leonard. He is scheduling a subcommittee meeting to develop recommendations to finalize your steering committee. And also the consultant team is reviewing past surveys and still doing a bit of existing conditions review. The TC1 resident participation meeting for the rezoning of 63 parcels along Washtenaw corridor will be held Thursday in person, November 16th at 6:30 p.m. at Pittsfield Elementary School. That location is 2543 Pittsfield Boulevard in the 48104 zip code. And your work session next week, I'd like to point out that that is also on a Wednesday. And at that meeting, you will receive an overview of the capital improvement plan process from Kayla Coleman, who is the capital projects asset manager.
Thank you. Do other commissioner officers or liaisons have anything to report? All right, moving forward, written communications are included in today's packet. We're going to move on to public comment. This is an opportunity for persons to speak up to 3 minutes about an issue that's not listed as a public hearing on this agenda. We'll first call on individuals present to address the commission, then remote participants. To speak during this public hearing remotely, please press *9 if listening by phone, or use the raise hand feature if viewing through the web link. For phone access, please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers who've raised their hand using the last 3 digits of their phone number or by name if available for those accessing through the web link, and you will hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please do move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sound so that we may hear you clearly. For either method of participation, please state your name and your address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anyone here present that would like to speak at this time? Mr. Garber.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Lee. Ken Garber, 28 Haverhill Court. I'd like to speak on 3874 Research Park Drive. I noticed there's no public hearing, so now is the time, right?
I believe there is a public hearing for Research Park Drive.
That's correct.
Okay.
Oh,
Then I'll wait. Thank you.
thank you. Anybody else here that would like to speak on a matter that's not listed on the agenda? Seeing no one, is there anyone that would like to address the commission remotely?
There is one hand raised, phone number ending in 534. You have permission to address the Planning Commission for 3 minutes.
Good evening. This is Tom Stolberg calling from Lowertown and Ann Arbor. Later on tonight, we're going to talk about one of several city-initiated mass rezonings or other zoning law changes. So we'll talk about the details about that one later, but I would like to thank you all for the increased wealth that you have created through other zoning changes for people like myself, people like me and my investors that already own properties that we'll be able to get a greater yield on. What it does for us is it immediately makes us unconditionally wealthier. It increases the value of our properties unconditionally. And then we can, we don't even have to develop to make that money. I know people talk about, well, you know, you should make a profit for development. No, we don't have to. We can go to the bank and borrow against that money, and we could develop in the township, create commuters if we want. We could buy a boat, anything we want to do. So it's that unconditional aspect of some of the city-initiated actions that kind of triggers that. And I'd also like to mention that one of the other things it does is by increasing the cost of the land, it increases one of the primary input to new development. So if we're looking for modest price housing, the first thing we do apparently is to increase the cost of one of the primary input into that housing. So I'm not sure if that's the wisest thing to do, but I just wanted to make sure that I personally thank all of you, and I'm sure there's other landholders and land speculators out there that are very grateful for the wealth that you are creating for us with some of these city-initiated zoning changes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other callers?
There are no other hands raised, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We'll move on to public hearings for the next business meeting, and I will defer to staff.
A public hearing on the following items will be held by the Ann Arbor Planning Commission on Tuesday, November 14th, 2023 at 7 p.m. The first of which, 2845 South State Street, which is a request to vacate 3 areas of roadway rights fronting 2845 South State Street. The owner of the property at 2845 South State requests that the roadway rights over a 50-foot by 229-foot and a 50-foot by 51-foot area adjacent to South State and a 27-foot by 310-foot area adjacent to Eisenhower Parkway are vacated. This action will remove these previously acquired roadway rights over the property and result in a uniform right-of-way edge along the east side of South State Street between Eisenhower Parkway and Oakbrook Drive, and along the north side of Eisenhower Parkway between South State Street and Boardwalk Drive. The second public hearing will be 312 East Huron Street. This is located at the southeast corner of East Huron and South Fifth Avenue, Zone D1, Downtown Core District. It's a proposal to construct an approximately 77,000 square foot, 6-story hotel building on 2 parcels totaling 0.45 acres. Access is proposed off South Fifth Avenue and leads to 9 surface parking spaces with stormwater detention located below the parking lot. No regulated natural features will be impacted from this proposal.
Thank you. We're going to move on to section 8A, unfinished business. This is regarding the 3520 Green Court. This is the plan unit development text amendment for city council approval. The proposed amended supplemental regulations will expand the permitted principal uses of the PUD, the permitted unit development, or planned unit development, excuse me. The permitted principal uses would include medical, dental offices, which are currently prohibited, would expand the definition of hotel, which currently restricts hotel developments to extended stays with 100-room max capacity. It would permit the development of multifamily residential housing, which is currently excluded. And the PUD district includes 35.26 acres. The staff recommendation is postponement. We do not have any staff or petitioner presentation of this matter. Is that correct?
That is correct, and the reason for this postponement to the second regular session in January, or that request, is because this petitioner later in your agenda is asking to be included in the city-initiated rezoning to TC1 along the Plymouth Road area, and they would like to postpone their prior interest in one direction toward TC1, and they await the outcome of this meeting and city council proceedings.
Thank you. So we're going to go to public hearing and then motion. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. We're going to move to public hearing. This is an opportunity for persons to speak up to 3 minutes about the proposed PUD amendments. We will first call on individuals to present to address the commission, then remote participants. To speak during this public hearing remotely, please press star 9 if listening by phone, or use the raise hand feature if viewing through the web link. For phone access, please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers that have raised their hands using the last 3 digits of your phone number or by name if available for those accessing through the web link. You'll hear an automated announcement saying that the host is allowing you to speak, and when speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television sounds so that we can hear you clearly. Again, for either method of participation, please state your name and your address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anyone present that would like to speak about this matter at this time? Yes.
But can I wait, or I need to speak first?
Is this regarding the 3520 Green Road PUD?
Oh, no, I'm from Plymouth Road.
Plymouth Road? If this is regarding the TC1, this is not quite that time.
Okay, yeah.
It'll be later in the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no one, is there anyone that would like to address the commission remotely? The proposed motion is to postpone to the January 16th regular session, moved by Commissioner Weich, seconded by Commissioner Abrams. Discussion of the proposed motions? I'm sorry. Voice vote without objection. That motion passes. Any objections? The motion passes. All right, we'll move on to section 8B, which is 3874 Research Park Drive. This is Sartorius Phase 2, site plan for Planning Commission approval. This is where the site plan is actually approved. Phase 2 proposal to construct a 110,800 square feet building addition onto the existing building. 77 new parking spaces with 2 new curb cuts off Research Park Drive are also proposed. The staff recommendation is approval, and we will move on to petitioner presentation. Ms. Breer.
All right, good evening, everybody. I'm Candace Breyer with Midwestern Consulting. I'm here tonight with Cameron McCausland, the applicant, as well as Peter Mertens from Sartorius, Tom Phillips from Hobson Black Architects, and Joe Vick, the contractor for this project. So just for context, this is phase 2 of the project. So you may remember from a year, maybe 2 ago, seeing phase 1. These are the central properties of the Research Park Drive Industrial Park area, south of I-94, east of State Street, north of Ellsworth. The site's just under 17 acres. It is zoned REORL, which allows for the use. As I mentioned, Phase 1 of this site plan was approved in February of 2022 and is currently under construction. This phase includes a proposed building addition, which would expand the uses that were proposed for Phase 1. Many elements of Phase 1 will be utilized as part of this expansion, including the parking lots, the drive aisles, the solid waste enclosures, stormwater management system, and many of the utility connections. The proposed Phase 2 improvements do include a small parking lot expansion, the associated lighting, some underground utilities, and landscaping. This site plan also does include removal of 1 landmark tree with 6 mitigation trees provided. So as I mentioned, the project is primarily a proposed building addition. It's 110,800 square feet, 1-story building addition on the north side of the Phase 1 building. There's also a proposed parking lot with 77 parking spaces, including 9 EVI and 32 EVC spaces, which would bring the total parking on site to 376 vehicle spaces. We're also proposing 26 additional bicycle parking spaces for a total of 58 on site. Access to the parking lot will be provided from the existing Phase 1 driveway, so we won't need a new driveway for the parking lot. But we are proposing 2 new access points along the north side of the building for truck loading and unloading and for fire access. We're also proposing a new crosswalk connection to the AATA bus stop that's on the east side of Research Park Drive. As far as utility service, it's pretty minimal. There will be a new sanitary sewer lead on the west side of the building connecting into Research Park Drive, and a new hydrant that's being constructed on the north side of the building. There are no new domestic water or fire service leads. The Phase 2 building will be serviced internally from the Phase 1 water network. We will use the existing infiltration basin that was constructed in Phase 1 that was sized to accommodate the runoff from this phase as well. So nothing needs to be done with that as far as stormwater is concerned. And then franchise utilities will utilize the connections that were put in for Phase 1. At this point, I can turn it over to Tom if he wants to come talk about the new building.
Evening, Tom Phillips with Hobbs & Black Architects here at Ann Arbor. The building is very much in character with the existing building that's under construction now. It's made of a sophisticated metal panel, insulated metal panel system, very similar interlocking that exceeds all the current energy code requirements. And this phase will not have as much glass by percentage, but the glass that is there is also high-performance glass intended to block some of the heat coming in from the sun. And then the roof as well is a white membrane roof that is not only reflective, but the insulation of the envelope also exceeds the energy code requirements. So it's very much in character with the first phase of the building. Show you a couple pictures of it. The trucking area is kind of tucked into the back of the building along the north edge, as Candace mentioned. And we tried to, offer some variation generate some interest in the building going around the perimeter and continue to express kind of the high-tech nature of the client and of the building itself. That's where we're at. So, do you want to? Okay, I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Tom. Cam, did you want to mention some of the sustainability features of the project?
Cam McCausland with Portage Capital. So, the sustainability issues that we really went through quite a bit, on the Phase 1 would continue on this phase, which would be full implementation of the LEED Gold status that we are achieving in this phase. Plan to do full solar to the extent we can get on the roof. That's, I think, one of the pictures I don't think are necessarily representative because we've got a pretty sizable solar array on the first phase that will be implemented. Obviously, everything related to the code with EV and any other things that we were looking at through the Phase 1. We will continue on with Phase 2, which has been a pretty exhaustive effort, both by Sartorius as a company with their initiatives on sustainability and in kind with Ann Arbor with what we were trying to achieve with this project.
Thanks. With that, we're happy to answer any questions.
Perfect, thank you. And then with that, I think we go to staff presentation. Mr. Chang?
Yeah, I think the petitioner did a good job of making an overall presentation on the site. The only thing I think I would add is there is the Mallets Creek that runs along the north portion of the site. That's a 25-foot natural features buffer that they have met. There are 2 additional curb cuts that are placed along Research Park Drive on the east and the west. That again does meet code. And with that, Planning Department recommends approval for this project.
Thank you. With that, we'll move on to public hearing. This is an opportunity for persons to speak up to 3 minutes about the proposed site plan. We'll first call on individuals present to address the commission, then remote participants. To speak during this public hearing remotely, please press *9 if listening by phone or use the raise hand feature if viewing through the web link. For phone access, please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will select on callers that have raised their hands using the last 3 digits of their phone number or by name if available. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak, and when speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sound so that we can hear you clearly. For either method of participation, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anyone present that would like to speak at this time?
As previously advertised, Ken Garber again. So this is hard for me because Sartorius is part of my professional world. I write for scientific journals about the life sciences, including some of the applications that Sartorius specializes in. So I should be thrilled they're here in Ann Arbor. But actually, it's the opposite. Why? Because they'll add to the city's carbon footprint in a big way for decades to come. If the energy use intensity of this building is the same as what Sartorius disclosed for Phase 1, 250 kilobitu's per square foot per year, I calculate that this new building will emit over 3,500 metric tons CO2 equivalent emissions a year, every year. That's the same as putting 650 gasoline-fueled motor vehicles on the road for the life of this building. I refer you to the June 23rd letter to Sartorius, signed by 40 prominent Ann Arbor residents, some of whom you probably know, and the company's response. Sartorius did not address any of our suggestions for reducing the energy demand of this building, and thus the requirement for constant air exchange, mostly from fume hood use. Adopting these innovations, as others have, should make full electrification possible. Although the company received almost $7 million in city tax breaks and state grants to locate here, Sartorius, at least their executive team, still acts as if they're doing us a favor. I spoke with Mr. McCausland, who you just heard from before the meeting for a little bit, and he mentioned to me that it's still uncertain what this new 110,000-foot building or addition will contain. The company still hasn't decided, apparently. It's his guess, based on what he told me, that there won't be labs there, that they'll consolidate the labs in Phase 1, which is now under construction, and they'll put other stuff in this addition. So while the building should be all electric regardless, if there are no labs here, there's certainly no excuse for gas. I was confused by Mr. McCausland's statement on solar. He referred to solar on this building, but it's not clear to me whether there will be additional solar beyond what is planned for Phase 1. So that's a question I would have. Maybe I just wasn't listening closely. If solar were placed on half the square footage of this roof, that would be over 1.2 megawatts, enough to power about 150 homes. The staff report mentions that OSI asked Sartorius to include on-site solar with storage, achieve full building electrification, and other things, going further to say that, quote, it does not recommend approval of this project. I ask that you postpone the site plan vote to allow Sartorius to meet with OSI and with concerned citizens about adopting measures that will allow full building electrification.
Thank you. Is there anyone else present that would like to speak at this time? Seeing none, is there anybody that's electing to comment remotely?
There are no hands raised, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. The proposed motion is that the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission approves the Sartorius site plan located at 3874 Research Park Drive. Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Councilmember Dish. We are in discussion. Would anyone like to kick us off? Commissioner Mills.
I'll do the quick one that follows on nicely to asking about solar panels. My computer was making sounds because I was Control-Fing to see if I missed it in the site plan. So that was one thing that I was curious about in trying to hear the presentation and see OSI's report too. what are the plans for solar on this large roof that is being added?
So you're currently in the first phase. We do have solar. I would be amiss to tell you what the stats are, but it's to the extent we can get panels on the roof, it's basically fully covered. This building is a laboratory building, a lot of air handling equipment. So, we are taking up a vast amount of space with air handling equipment that's on the roof. So obviously you have to be, you have some loading issues with the roof and also with, access around, those units. So to the extent that we have solar, though, it's pretty much the roof is covered either with mechanical equipment or solar panels when the first phase is done. You wouldn't see that today's version. It's not that far along yet. Mm-hmm. We anticipate the same thing will happen with phase 2. We've got lead to be able to, that standard to be able to keep up with. So that in itself, between all the other building envelope installation and the vast other things that we're doing, would almost dictate that we have to get that much solar on the roof to begin with. So
this is a question for staff, I guess. I'm not seeing it in the site plan necessarily, and if it's there, then OSI doesn't know that plan because they also did not indicate anything in phase 1. So are we missing something?
I don't believe so. I don't think it's shown on the site plan either on the roof. So unless somebody wants to confirm that I'm missing on the site plan, if it's something that's going to be added in the future, is that?
The phase 2 solar?
Yes.
It's on the roof. It's not on anywhere other than the roof. It's not. We don't have enough room on the site to even put any additional on the site. If you look at the the plan from the standpoint of it's either building, parking lot, or water management, stormwater management. There's not a whole lot to put anything anywhere else. But yes, they anticipate the solar. The solar is almost a little bit of a design build thing as you go. To understand where we can actually put those things when we have. So we went and planned that in this plan approval. We anticipate to put it in on though.
So
by the way, OSI, we had it on we would discuss this at length during phase 1. I don't think that met any requirement that they were looking for. As a side.
And I would just say it's not there right now. When I look at this, I see that as a huge opportunity,
For sure.
Particularly if there's not as much lab space in this side of the building.
We don't know that 100%. That was. I would prefer you to ask me related to the use of the building.
All right.
We don't know 100% what we're doing at the building right now. There's several business opportunities in front of Sartorius that they're trying to really ascertain what happens. Obviously, they've got facilities all over the world and all in the country here as well. So that's a moving target a little bit. One of the things that we're, that we, as we sit here today, Candace and I were actually just looking, this process from the start of it is almost a year as we go through this. So much changes in that amount of time from a business aspect. That's even been a moving target, to be perfectly honest, from what we started this out to be and where we're at right now. Could be lab, could be, office space, could be research, could be a lot of things. I think that from the standpoint of solar, I think that we would make that commitment, if we wanted to amend anything from that standpoint that we are putting solar. The lead requirement that we are trying to ascertain is going to put us there regardless. We have to get there with solar.
And if that's a commitment that you're willing to make, that's something that I would love to see, in part just because I just think
the spec would be a little bit, out there right now.
Whatever, exactly. You haven't designed what your roof space is, but something that suggests there's lots of different things that could happen on a roof, right? So, and there's play between all of these, whether it's white roof to be reflective,
sure.
For cooling, helping with cooling, whether it's a green roof to help be insulative,
yep.
Or putting solar panels on the roof. I mean, those are design choices, and I'm not an architect, but I would imagine that those change how your design, how you're thinking about designing that.
It does, especially with what's inside the building and where it goes as well.
Certainly. What I would suggest is that particularly in presenting and talking about we're thinking specifically about this phase tonight. And so thinking what's on this phase, and this is what I've been trying to sort out, is what we're seeing versus what we're hearing is not in keeping. So something, if this is to include solar, having that commitment to maximize solar to the extent possible on the roof would certainly make me feel much more comfortable about this moving towards sustainability. Again, don't know all of the details of LEED, but there's lots of things. Being in a city like Ann Arbor earned you some points on LEED from the get-go. So I think that having some additional commitment there would make me feel a whole lot better. Otherwise, I think that this is in keeping with this area. I mean, I think that when I look at the building and the plans, what I see is huge opportunity sitting there to help advance sustainability goals and unmet opportunity. And so that's my comment, but I would turn it back to the chair.
I would just invite at a certain point, when I think this first phase is along, and I'm sure that Sartorius would love to have everyone out to see this building, because I would tell you, outside of a municipal building or a university building, it's probably one of the most sustainable buildings that's ever been built in Ann Arbor. I can tell you, and the guy back there who's paying for it all would tell you that, because we're spending a lot of money on things that they want to achieve. It's really not been driven by Ann Arbor. It's really more their company initiative that's got us there. But we are investing a ton in sustainability efforts in this building. If you really would like to examine some of the Sartorius initiatives, you would see that is a huge global goal for them as they produce more real estate around the world.
Thank you. Commissioner White.
Thank you, Chair Lee. Question first for staff. Where are the brownfields noted with this development? Is it in STEAM at all, or is it completely outside? Because I heard $7 million from Mr. Garber, but is that a 15-year or 30-year? Is that the total amount?
I'm not prepared to answer that question.
Okay.
I don't know if somebody from staff knows.
Well, I'll turn to Ms. Kelly. So the meeting that I missed, where we talked about getting answers or bringing in folks, because one of the things that I'm concerned about is the taxpayers are paying a significant burden because they're getting a tax deferment for 15, 30 years, and we aren't getting sort of the sustainability objectives that OSI have requested. And I know that those two things sit in separate spaces, but I think they should come into the same space so that we understand that a part of what we are approving, because our code hasn't caught up to our objectives right now, is that we're actually paying them to pollute in our community in a way that they would not be able to if they were building this development in the headquartered location of this company. So how do we get to that information so that we are, both as a community, better informed about how we're carrying the tax burden of this pollution?
Mm-hmm. We can certainly incorporate that information into staff reports moving forward so that they're in an integrated location for the Planning Commission's consideration. If Mr. Chang does not have the information before him right now, I do not. I could attempt to get more details to circulate before the end of tonight's meeting, or to share via follow-up.
I don't know that it is particularly necessary for you to do that for tonight's meeting, but it's just it's a huge part of how these things come to the table. And I know the state has also granted monies to bring them here, but given that we're not getting the OSI recommendations of all electrification, solar, then really we're deferring this tax base to allow them to bring in, this natural gas to this development until we can catch up with our objectives. And so I just want to make sure that that is also noted as we continue to talk about this development.
I certainly concur that having project details to give a rounded context is helpful. I will, however, note that in order to approve a petition before the body, it is most important that it meet the criteria of the city code, and that is what is before you this evening. And
Yes, and I've had some objections with the impact to our health and well-being and that phrase when we go about our approval, but we don't have to have that conversation again tonight.
Just to be
Also
clear, the
noted.
brownfield.
I'm not addressing you, sir. Thank
Okay,
you.
well, the brownfield was
I am
approved
not
in phase
addressing
one,
you,
it has
sir.
nothing to do with phase
Chair Lee,
two.
can you please instruct the petitioner not to address the commission?
I believe that Commissioner Weich would like to finish. Thank you.
Thanks.
No problem.
Yeah, so I appreciate it, and it's just, but I think it's a totality. I think we are now at a point where scientists have said, we are clearly going to hit the 1.5, degree number, and it's whether we get to 1.6. And so, our climate crisis is real, and that's going to affect all of us. It's going to, in fact, the water waste, it's going to hit storm water, all of those things as storms. We have more 100, 500, and 1,000-year storms, but we don't have a means to say no, because that sort of phrase about the impact that it would have on the well-being of the community isn't enforceable in this way. So at least having this information about how we're, deferring the tax revenue that we would need to fight the climate change that this pollution is going to affect in our community is something that I think is important for us to consider. So I'll leave it there. Thanks, Chair Lee.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Councilmember Dish.
Okay, so I have a question, but what I see as the total for the brownfield was 2.7 million, and there is $1 million going into the Affordable Housing Fund by virtue of there being a brownfield agreement, but I am not clear on that, and so I was hoping that if Mr. Delacourt is anywhere within the range of my voice, he would come and speak to us. So it may be a little less than, at least the brownfield agreement may be less than what Mr. Garber mentioned. There's significant cleanup that happened on this site for phase one, and but nonetheless, what we have in front of us is phase two. And so what I wanted to ask was, would it be possible to specify what you need to do to meet LEED Gold? Because I think there might be people listening for whom that's not an obvious, those components are not obvious, and it might be helpful to hear them.
It's, that lead consultant, which is not in the room with us tonight, would probably be better in explaining that, or
Okay.
somebody that has a much more,
Okay.
I'd love to be able to tell you all the details of it, but, it's obviously, it's related to energy efficiency of the building for the most part. We were actually trying to attain platinum, which is the highest standard you can get, but it's unfortunately, you can't get it even with this type of a building. You can't get that. So we actually went to the highest level, excuse me, of the LEED status that we could obtain for a building of this nature.
And it's for both of the buildings, right? Phase one and two.
For sure.
So-
If you don't have it on both, then you don't have it on either, basically.
Right. So, and then I'm sure that there's construction and demolition, a component of construction and demolition in that as well, that you have to.
In the existing first phase, for
Yes,
sure, there was,
exactly.
demolition. There was an existing 50, 60-year-old building that we demolished.
Yes.
Phase two is greenfield site.
Right. Okay.
I can tell you the brownfield, the way the affordable housing gets, that's by internal Ann Arbor, by virtue of the Ann Arbor, which they changed several years ago.
Yeah.
That allows that to be subsidized into the affordable housing part
Yeah,
of the brownfield.
understanding that that's not an extra thing that you're putting in, but it is an effect
No, that was-
of the brownfield agreement,
They can
which
allocate,
is...
they can allocate part of the brownfield to the housing initiative.
Right, exactly. So we have to put that on the plus side. Okay, so I feel as though, and if I'm misreading the room, let me know, folks, but I feel as though there's just a little bit of a question of how what we're seeing on the site plan corresponds to the LEED Gold certification. And so there's a little, no, you're not, you're feeling like that's not true.
LEED Gold wouldn't appear on a site plan.
Well,
It's more of a building standard than a site plan.
well, if it requires you to achieve a certain amount of electrical offset, we would be able to see that on the site plan?
No.
No? So, okay. So again, we're in a position where we know you'll do it, and we don't have to worry that we don't know the details.
The amount of investment that went into the first phase, it would be criminal for us to not continue that to obtain that LEED Gold status.
No, I'm sure you're, yeah, obviously. Okay, so I wish that I am actually, no, let me frame this differently. It is terrific that you are doing an infill project on this land, and you are intensifying a use. You are giving us greater efficiency of land use through what you are doing there. Really appreciate the work you're doing to improve connectivity and bicycle transit. And, you know, you're doing a lot, especially in phase one. We saw all the work that you were doing to make this less of an island, and all of that is very much appreciated. It is great that Sartorius generally has a commitment to carbon neutrality by 2045, but there is a sense of urgency that 2045 is a little bit of a late target. And so I think that some of the concerns that you're hearing expressed are merely genuine responses out of that sense of urgency. And I think that it's clear that you're an ally in our climate mitigation goals. And it is also clear that we don't have any standards. You know, we can have the feedback from OSI, but that's not written in any of our building standards, and so I understand that. But I would really hope that as you build as you go, as you as you figure things out with the second building, you would seek the maximum efficiency for that building so that the solar you put on that roof offsets as significant a portion of your energy use as possible. And I look forward to, as this project proceeds, hearing more details about how much you can offset. So, but thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Any other commissioners?
I just wanted to state briefly that I was able to locate the proceedings of the approval of the brownfield plan in March and circulated that to commissioners by email, if you'd like to take a look.
Thank you. Mr. McClausen, there was a moment where you did want to give some information regarding the brownfield. Did you want to add on to that at all?
No, other than that it was approved in phase one when we did demolish the existing building that was there. There was, between, it was deemed functionally obsolescent by the city assessor here. And also there was some environmental contamination that was mitigated at that point as well.
Sure.
So that was all related to phase one. Brownfield was approved as part of that phase one. So just wanted to be clear that the phase two has got no bearing on that brownfield. But there's no more mitigation efforts that need to take place on the site. We did it all within the phase one.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Mr. Chick?
Yeah, I just wanted to also interject that, from the planning staff's perspective of the recommendation of approval, it does meet, at least for the planning and zoning code, along with the other departments, which may include whether it's the fire marshal or engineering or transportation, et cetera. It also, meets with the comprehensive plan recommendation for the uses at this site. So that's how we, determine an approval recommendation. I do appreciate that, yes, OSI still has concerns on this project, and those still remain.
Thank you. I'm sorry? Councilmember Dish.
Yeah, indeed, looking at this document, it looks like it is 6 million in brownfield TIF funds, at least from the document that Mix Kelly just shared with us.
Thank you.
Just to say that I was not correct.
Thank you for the clarification. Any other comments? If not, I will add my 2 cents, which is simply that given the Unified Development Code standards, it's meeting setback, as well as Washtenaw County's Water Resource Commissioner standards, the bank full first flush requirements are met. From the permitted use standpoint, office, laboratory research, the use fits. So as much as I know that climate change is obviously an emergency that we do face, and we appreciate your commitment to being net zero, fully sustainable by 2045. We do urge to do everything that you can, but I also know that you guys are taking a scientific approach to saying what benchmarks can we reasonably meet. So with that, I believe this is compliant with all required standards of the UDC. And that's really what we can judge this merit by. So with that, do we have any other commissioners that would like to add? Any other comments? All right, rereading the proposed motion, the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission approves the Sartorius site plan located at 3874 Research Park Drive. We'll be doing a voice vote. Mux Kelly. Yes.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Lee, yes. Commissioner Abrams.
Yes.
Commissioner Weish.
Yes.
Commissioner Salve.
Yes.
Councilmember Dish.
Yes.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Commissioner Mills.
Yes.
Commissioner Weatherby.
Yes.
That motion carries.
Thank you, and good luck.
Right, thank you.
All right, we are moving on to section 10A, other business, TC1 Plymouth Road area rezoning. I will actually, at this point in time, I will be recusing myself from this particular petition. Thank you very much, as my employer has submitted a petition to include one of their properties to this TC1. Thank you. What? You almost in this one? I almost, yeah, did one part. He was like, I want to add it. Okay, well, I am out.
Thank you, Commissioner Lee. Okay, so I will introduce the petition. This is the Plymouth Road area rezoning to TC1 Transit Corridor District and Transit Corridor Street Type Designation, a city-initiated rezoning petition. This is a petition to rezone 45 parcels in 3 areas along Plymouth Road from current zoning designation to the TC1 zoning designation, and to designate the segments of Plymouth Road, Green Road, and Nixon Road proposed to be TC1 zoning as Transit Corridor Street Type. The total area is 127 acres. The staff recommendation is approval, and we will have a staff presentation from Planner Leo. Welcome.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. We have prepared a staff report, and in the interest of time and efficiency, I'll really, I won't hit on it all. I'm happy to answer any questions. But this is the 3rd rezoning that we have proposed for the same purpose, to rezone areas of the city to TC1. The staff report goes over some background, including when the TC1 district was created, some of its intents, objectives, its goals. It goes over some of the history of our zoning map changes. It details the public engagement that we did specific to this project. And then it goes into the actual proposed rezoning. My presentation here tonight will focus on 2 things: the areas that are proposed to be rezoned and some facts and data about those, and then the area height and placement standard and development standards of the TC1 district itself, so you get an idea of what the new rules would be and a little bit of a comparison to underlying zoning districts. So the proposed rezoning is, as mentioned, 45 parcels that cover about 127 acres. There are 99 unique addresses in the rezoning area, and these come from 42 individual lots and 3 condominium, which have, and then both, some of the individual lots have multiple addresses, as well as the condominiums have a lot of individual owners. I have broken down the area into 3 sub-areas just for discussion purposes. They are not connected. We have a east, central, and west, or west, central, east, depending on which way you like to read the page. The east sub-area has 19 parcels, about 53 acres. It includes 2001 Commonwealth, 2000 Green Road, and between 3250 and 3650 Plymouth Road. Mostly on the north side of Plymouth, a little bit on the south side of Plymouth. Also, as part of this, we will be designating some streets, specifically Plymouth and Green, as transit corridor streets. Then the TC1 district, the front setbacks are different depending on if you are on a transit corridor or if you are not. I should say that this is a proposed scheme that is going before City Council for first reading on Monday. If it is not passed, then the regular standards for front setback, there will only be one setback standard for the TC1. But as shown, Green and Plymouth Road will be designated as transit corridor streets. And again, as I mentioned, the front setback standards are different depending on what front lot line you are. This is a map of the underlying zoning districts in the east sub-area. They include O, office, 2 PUD zoning districts, C1, local business, C1B, community convenience center, C3, fringe commercial, as well as RE, research, and R5, hotel. The central area, excuse me, the central area has 17 parcels, covers about 60 acres. It spans, it's sort of centered at the Plymouth Road Mall and the Traverwood Shopping Center. It includes 2000 Traverwood Drive and 2301 to 3055 Plymouth Road. The proposed transit corridor street designations in this area are Plymouth and Nixon. And those would get the designation of transit corridors. There's also some frontage on Huron Parkway and Traverwood. Those do not get transit corridor street frontages. The underlying zoning in this sub-area includes ORL, which is Office Research Light Industrial, Office, O, and C3, Fringe Commercial. In the west sub-area, there are 9 parcels. It's a little more than 13 acres. It includes 1812 Upland Drive, 1635 to 1800 Plymouth Road. And this one, again, includes both a lot on the north, a little bit on the south side of Plymouth. The Plymouth Road is the only designated transit corridor for this sub-area. Upland does not get a transit corridor designation. The underlying zoning in the west sub-area includes 1 PUD, C1, local business again, C1B, community convenience center, C3, fringe commercial, and P, parking. I feel like this is a repeated slide. Am I going backwards? Maybe. Yeah. Is for a zoning district floor area ratio or density and height comparison. So I got to move a little window here, make it a little bit smaller. There we go. Overall, I would describe this as the TC1 district does allow a lot more density than the underlying zoning districts, as the top row indicates. The C1 district has 100% floor area ratio. That means that whatever the square feet of the site is, that's the square feet of the building, the most total building that you can have. Now, that building, because of setbacks, you can't really build lot line to lot line to lot line. So if you want to generally build exactly equal amount, building is probably going to have some portions of 2 stories or more. But this is what it means. 100% means whatever the square foot of the site is, that is the maximum square footage of the building. In the C1B district, it's 150%. C3 is 200%. The office district, 75, ORL and RE, also 75. The R5 hotel district, little hard to compare apples to oranges. There's no maximum building size, but you need at least 900 square feet of lot area per hotel room. The parking district has no density, no building size ratio, and neither does the TC1 district. But all the districts do have a height limit. The C1B has the shortest at 35. C1B 50 and C3 is 55. The O, ORL, and RE all have a maximum height of 55 feet or none. I'll explain in a moment. Hotel motel has a either 50 or 80. 50 is normal, 80 is when you put parking underneath the building. The P district requires an equal height limit to the adjacent zoning designation. And the TC1 also has a variable height limit between starting at 55, working your way up to 300. I'll explain in a minute. Front setbacks are pretty much quite in line. Most minimums are either 10 or 15 feet. Some are 25. Most maximum front setbacks are 25. They push up to 40 or 50 in some areas. The TC1 requires a minimum of either 0 feet or 18 feet. But the 18 is measured from the back of the curb. So it could be just a few feet from the property line. And the maximum in the TC1 district is either 15, 20, or 28, depending, again, on if you're on a transit corridor or not, and what kind of building it is. So you can see that the minimum setbacks are in line. The maximums are a little bit less. I said I would get to those. Height limit, the O, ORL, and RE district, the maximum height is 55 feet when you're within 300 feet of a residential zoning district. Beyond that, there is no maximum height limit. I do say this with a grain of salt because if you recall, with the 75% floor area ratio, you would have to have an exceptionally large site to then have enough square footage to go up that high. If your buildings can only get so small and then they're structurally like a pencil and you can't fit anything on each floor. So it does have quite a high height limit. It's none. That may be a little bit unrealistic. You'd need a enormous site to actually get something extremely tall with the size and the floor area limitation. The TC1 height has 4 ranges. When you're between 0 and 80 feet, it's a maximum of 55. So when you're pretty close to a residential district. And then when you're between 80 and 300, you are a maximum of 75 feet. You'll notice the similarities. 300 feet is a common boundary line. Lower height, 55 or 75 feet when you're within 300 feet of residential. So that's a commonality that was not a coincidence. The TC1 was modeled after some of the best elements of our current zoning districts. It's when you get beyond 300 feet in the O, ORL, and RE, theoretically, you can go unlimited. In the TC1 district, there's 2 more levels. One is 120 feet, and then even further, when you're 1,000 feet away, you could be 300 feet tall. There's a front setback note explaining what I said. Those are proposed setbacks. I have a colorful graphic. It is a graph, but it's one way to visually represent how the height is broken down in the TC1 district compared to the other districts. The first row is purple, and that is 30 feet, which represents single-family residential. All of the single-family residential districts have a 30-foot height limit, and some of the multifamilies do as well. So compared to that purple line, all the way, do I have a pointer? I will not stop to find out. The C1 district allows a little bit more height. If you remember, it was 35 feet. A little bit more height all the way across, everywhere in the C1 district. The C1B, C3, the beginning part of O, ORL, RE, all of those, they have a 55-foot height limit. C1B and C3, the whole district, no variation, just that's what it is, straight back. In the O, ORL, and RE, once you get to that 300-foot line, they go up. This chart shows them at 300 feet, just so they don't run off the page. But remember, the height limit is actually none. The R5, it has the two limits, both 50 feet and 80 feet. Parking is equal to residential, that's why it's all purple and all the same there. In the TC1 district, there's 4 levels. The first 2 are within the 300 feet, same as O and ORL. Very close, it's 55 feet. A little bit farther away, it's the green at 75 feet. Then when you get to that 300-foot mark, instead of just being none, as some other districts are, it's either 120 feet, which is the yellow, or it's 300 feet, and that's a true 300-foot with the red. We have on our website an interactive interactive mapping tool, and when you go, you'll see this. I realize the buffers are covering what's underneath, and you can't even see the roads, but bear with us, it's better than nothing. This shows the east sub-area and the purple outline of the proposed zoning. The orange, which you'll only see on the far left side of the page, there's a little swath of orange, right, that spot is a limit of 55 feet. Then the blue area, that area is between 80 and 300 feet of residential zoning. So in the blue area, that height limit is 75 feet. The yellow area means that they are more than 300 feet away from residential. That height limit in that area is 120 feet. And the clear, that's where you can have up to 300 feet in height if you so choose. In the central sub-area, this area, again, the proposed boundary is outlined in purple. The orange has a 55-foot height limit. The blue has a 75-foot height limit. The bulk of the middle is the yellow, and that has a 120-foot height limit. And I believe technically there is a tiny, tiny spot that could have a 300-foot building. I don't know how you would engineer this building, but there you go. And then on the west sub-area, you can see here there's no clear. There's no spot in the west sub-area where you could have up to 300 feet, up to a 300-foot building. You can only have 55, as shown in the orange area, 75 in the blue area, or 120 feet maximum height in the yellow area. The TC1 district also has some additional development standards that none of the current zoning designations have. The TC1 district says no more than 2 curb cuts. Currently, curb cuts are regulated by how many feet of frontage you have. The more feet of frontage you have, the more curb cuts you can have. It's just a simple formula. The TC1 district says, doesn't matter what the formula says, you have 2. The TC1 district also says that parking lots must be behind or next to buildings. They must be surrounded by the buildings. I will mention that this is a current standard on the books for all districts. However, every other district except the TC1 says if you're on a corner lot, you only need to be behind or to the side of one of the sides. So depends on the perspective. Just an example, I'll say the corner of Main and Huron. The building needs to go at the corner of Main and Huron, but from the Main Street side, there's no parking. The parking's in the back. But if you approach it from the Huron side, the parking might be on the side. In the TC1 district, it's saying you have to have some sort of L-shaped building or something. You have to make that parking not the dominant feature, and it has to go behind or to the rear. The TC1 district limits the surface area of the parking lot to be either the same as or just slightly larger than the building footprint. If you want additional spaces, they've got to be in parking structures or underneath the building, a parking garage, so forth. The TC1 district says if you have a site that's over about 1.5 acres, you must design it in blocks. Your building can only be so big, and you have to have multiple buildings. Can't have one giant building. And it says the building frontage must be 70% of the lot width or the block width. meaning your building has to be wide and has to go along the sidewalk, spanning the whole lot. And the final set of additional development standards, sort of as mentioned, the maximum building size is 250 feet wide and 360 feet on the diagonal. If you want a bigger building than that, fine, you have to propose 2 buildings. The buildings have to have a functional entrance on the sidewalk, sidewalks on all sides of the building. Dwelling units are not permitted within 100 feet of a signalized intersection. And buildings, except for townhouses or apartment buildings, must meet the downtown building design requirements for minimum first-story height, which is 15 feet, street level transparency, which means how much of your building is windows, and then there are some rules about the windows themselves. Then my final slide about the development standards of the TC1 district compared to others. Parking is mostly not done by zoning district. It's done by land use. And of the dozens of land uses in our table, some of them already have a maximum parking limit. And that's mostly one space per 265 or 250 square feet. Phrased another way, it's about 4 spaces per 1,000, but it's about it is one space per 265 or 250. And notable land uses that have that maximum are your average size retail or general offices. Sometimes, for some specifics, the financial or medical offices, they have a maximum parking limit of 1 space per 180 square feet. The TC1 doesn't go by land use. It has just a district-wide maximum of 1 space per 333 square feet. So when you compare the TC1 to most parking maximums, you're allowed to have, or you're required to have 25% less than what you would get otherwise. But when you compare the TC1 district to banks or medical dental offices, it can actually be 40% more. And now that would be a development that is exclusively that type of use, but the TC1 district relies on its proximity to transit to to reduce those maximums, and B, it relies on mixed uses and mixing types of uses, mixing time of day requirements. You know, if you have non-residential and residential sharing the same parking lot, you can use those spaces 24/7 because the offices might be there during the day, apartments might be there, apartment parkers might be there overnight, and the two may not meet. But that is a high-level overview. I will say that also the staff report goes through some of our analysis of the benefits and pros and cons as well of the TC1 district. Those include how it does achieve many of our comprehensive and many of our variety of goals that are across documents, in the transportation plan, in the non-motorized plan, in our parks plan, in our master plan, in our land use plan. The TC1 also is an opportunity to unify the zoning along corridors. Right now, as you saw on the zoning map, it's a lot of different zoning rules. It's a lot to keep track of for residents. What is permitted on this property, and then what is permitted right next door. It's a lot to keep track of for developers. This is a more unified approach to corridor zoning. There are some cons to this, though. Admit there's always. And those include that many of the existing structures will become non-conforming because of their size. If they're more than 250 feet wide, that's too big in the TC1 district. Or maybe for front setback, they're set back too far. Now, those zoning districts already have maximum setbacks, so they might already be non-conforming for front setback. This would just be changing the flavor of the non-conformity. And we have seen that rezoning might slow the pace of new development. There has been no new or infill development in any existing TC1 district to date. And then I will wrap up by pointing out, and as you know, we don't normally point out individual correspondence that has been received for any particular topic. But we have 3 pieces of correspondence, one of which is mentioned in the staff report and was in the packet, and 2 of which came after the packet was published. And those are not so general, those are very specific pieces, and so I'll point those out. That one of them was from Oxford Companies asking for 2 lots to be included in the proposed rezoning. And then the other pieces of correspondence, one is from First Martin Corporation that came on Monday, October 30th, and another from Orchard Hills Maplewood Homeowners Association that came, which is OHMHA, that came today on November 1st. And they are asking for 3 lots to be excluded from the proposed rezoning. And again, as you know, we don't normally mention these things, but this is very specific. It's not a general support, not a general opposition, but they were asking for a change in the motion. Staff is recommending approval. I know I glossed over some of the background, so it's always happy to answer any background questions. Also happy to answer any more details.
Thank you. We'll now move to the public hearing. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about the proposed rezoning. We'll first call on individuals present to address the commission, then remote participants. To speak during this public hearing remotely, press *9 if listening by phone, or use the raise hand feature if viewing through the web link. For phone access, call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of your phone number or by name if available. For those accessing through the web link, you'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. For either method of participation, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anyone present that would like to speak at this time? You can approach the podium. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Elizabeth Gallimore, address 3139 Plymouth Road. And what I wanted to talk about is 2 things. One is I'm in the section between Georgetown and Commonwealth. There are 5 homes. They are zoned residential. There are 4 out of the 5 that are now rentals. What is zoning? My other concern is in the 1990s, I spoke before City Council about the need for a street light at the end of Georgetown and Plymouth Road for the number of people who had to cross Plymouth Road to get to the bus stop. And they said there would not be a light put there because commuters wouldn't like it. In the early 2000s, when Steve Rapundolo was the mayor, I came back to City Council and reported on the number of accidents that occur at that corner and how dangerous it is with 5 lanes, and you've got a whole neighborhood trying to get out of that section. He said it would be put in sooner rather than later, and City Council agreed with him. It is not there yet. It is 2023. City Council approved a crosswalk. It is not at the corner. It is down the street on Plymouth Road. The problem is, if you, like me, own a minivan, you can't fit your car in that turn lane past that little gadget they built in the middle of the road to make that left-hand turn without worrying about getting hit in the behind. A-ride drivers refuse to make that turn. They, like I, drive the wrong way into the road. It's a one-way street at that point. There needs to be a light at Georgetown and Plymouth Road. And then I would also like you to check the zoning on those homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else present who would like to address the commission? You can approach the podium.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ina Lee. I'm the owner of 2765 Plymouth Road. We have a business there. I opened it up. It's called Embrace Orthodontics. I opened it up from scratch in November 2019, right before COVID. So now it's 4 years, and my business is finally, have a really good start finally, and then up and running. So I just read about this rezoning activity on Arbor News, and it drew my attention because on the one hand, I understand that this could be a really great thing to happen to allow the increase of the residential density to be close to the North Campus area, because apparently, I'm actually also a resident in the at the North Campus area, so I understand housing can be very, very tight there. So I do understand the need to increase the density of the residential housing there. On the other hand, by looking at the maps for all these three parts along the Plymouth Road, as a tenant, not really as a property owner, it wasn't clear to me as far as what the future development of these corridors or the zones or rezoning activity will impact my business, because even though I wasn't there at the November 26th public meeting held at the Travelwood Library, but I did read the article, and then I believe there was another resident named Donna. She did bring up the concerns about some similar rezoning and redevelopment of some downtown areas had already happened, and then unfortunately, while the residential parts fill up, the redevelopment, the hope for bringing back the business has not happened, and I'm just afraid if that's going to happen, what's going to really negatively impact a small business like mine. And there's a lot of us in these three parts along Plymouth Road. And that's from a business perspective, and also as as I mentioned, I'm also a resident living very close to the North Campus.
You have 5 seconds left.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. So then I'm also interested to know are there any plans for the infrastructure, for example, the schools, all these other things that has to come along to really support the increased residential density there.
Thank you. Is there anybody else present who would like to address the commission?
Thanks, Commissioner Abrams. Of course, I have to have my say. Ken Garber again. First of all, I wanted to say I appreciate all Mr. Leo's work on this zoning district and Plymouth Road area in particular, and for her clear explanations of the implications. I support TC1 zoning for Plymouth Road. The increased density along the transit corridor, the setback, and especially the parking restrictions, I think are really great. But I have an idiosyncratic kind of comment about the district or about TC1 in general. As you know by now, I view everything in the world in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. It's a depressing way to live, but I can't help myself. Let me walk you through a thought experiment. Let's assume that with TC1 zoning, we convert a current commuter to an Ann Arbor resident. That's what we want, right? Further assume that this person gives up their car completely and walks and bikes everywhere. Zero driving, even for vacation. Let's even assume no transit emissions. At the average annual Michigan vehicle mileage of 14,300 miles a year driving, we will prevent 5.4 metric ton CO2 equivalent emissions annually from this person driving their vehicle. Great outcome, right? Yes, but let's assume that this person will live in a new 1,150 square foot apartment or condo heated with fossil gas. Consumers Energy cites this figure, 52.9 kilobtu per square foot for gas consumption in new mid-Michigan low-rise multifamily buildings. For our hypothetical apartment or condo, that comes to 7.9 metric tons CO2 equivalent emissions a year from gas combustion alone. That's 2.5 tons more than the 5.4 tons we save by eliminating a motor vehicle. So even in the best case scenario, we have done nothing for the climate since that person's former residence will still be emitting CO2. In fact, we're adding to emissions a lot. That's why to make a positive climate impact, we have to couple TC1 with building electrification and net zero energy new construction. TC1 and higher density by themselves are great, but they dig us deeper into a hole when it comes to emissions. We can't just build our way out of the climate crisis. In short, TC1 can help if it's part of a comprehensive solution. Unfortunately, I see no such solution on the table. So tonight, I support a yes vote on TC1, but I think there has to be the recognition that this is a very, very partial solution to any kind of climate change mitigation. Thank you.
Thank you. Ty, would you like to address the commission?
Yes, my name is LaFeece Gallimore, and I live at 3139 Plymouth Road. And I've listened to the presentations tonight in terms of the rezoning of the Plymouth Road area. The one concern that I have is what happens to those 5 houses that's located along Plymouth Road across from the water tower, if you're familiar with that area? Because I'm not quite sure, clear in terms of what is being proposed for that particular area with the rezoning request that you're making. So is there some way that I can get some clarification on that? I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else present who would like to address the commission? Okay. Ms. Kelly, is there anybody online?
There are 5 hands raised right now. The first caller is phone number ending in 348. You have permission to address the commission for 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Jane Queenston. I serve on the board of Orchard Hills Maplewood Homeowners Association, and I also have a residence at 2750 Georgetown and 3347 Elsinore Court. Thank you very much for considering removing the 3 properties that were mentioned earlier. I would also like to make you aware that all the lots in Plymouth Park from 2001 all the way up to Michigan House 2301 are deed restricted from being rezoned PC1. 3001 Plymouth also, I believe, is deed restricted in Campus Heights, and there are 2 others on Green that I heard are being added, 2500 Plymouth, and the parcel is split on have land use restrictions inconsistent with DC1. Including height and footprint. You might want to also consider recheck all the PUDs aren't also deed restricted. Also, any additions for recent petitions to be included would reset the process for due process. Notification should go to all persons with property interests instead of just the ones listed on the properties as the owners, so please make sure everyone is included. And I also ask, why is the Planning Commission rezoning PUDs to TC1? It's a setback for city planning to seek, it's a setback for city planning because the state law already gives planning a great deal of influence on the design and land use on PUDs for urban planning, including for more housing, but the flexibility isn't permitted in TC1. Also, PUDs are deed restricted to their site plans. Rezoning reopens their site plans and development agreements and any with condominium projects. Has this been checked with the city attorneys? In the past, they have ceded and withdrawn rezoning from PUD parcels to PL on Green. While I support urban planning and more housing in lawfully appropriate locations, please consider dropping these properties or tabling them to be sure they're lawfully compliant to state property laws. The Michigan Zoning Enabling Act sides with property owners and deed restrictions on land land use and zonings, as does the Michigan courts. Please abide by them. Please also consider tabling properties with frontage on Green without direct driveway access to Plymouth Road as inconsistent to TC1. Green Road isn't a transit corridor. The area north of Green Road post office is exclusively mid-density, multifamily, and PUD housing, parks, and schools. The residential area is largely deed restricted and inconsistent with TC1. Unlike Plymouth Road and other TC1 corridors, Green is not MDOT classified and doesn't permit commercial transit on Green Road. I don't know if that was my time warning, but thank you very much for the consideration. I hope that...
Out of time. Thank you.
Our next caller is Libby Benton. You have permission to address Planning Commission for 3 minutes.
Great. Hello. Hi. My name is Libby Benton. I live at 2359 Prairie Street, and I'm calling to support the TC1 rezoning. This would rezone properties that are just at the end of our street, and I strongly support it. Our neighborhood, we moved to the neighborhood because it is such a nice walkable community. We can get to schools, my son's daycare, grocery stores, Rite Aid, restaurants, bars. It's really libraries. It's really a lovely place, and we'd really like to see the neighborhood move in the direction of being more walkable and more transit-oriented and having more development, and more housing. And that final point is really what's most important to me because it's, a neighborhood that has a lot of sense of community and a lot of opportunities, and I really want more families of all income levels to be able to live in a neighborhood like this one. Our next door neighbor, who's one of the original owners in this subdivision, shared with me that when the development was built, though there are no restrictive covenants, that the developer had a policy of not selling to African Americans. And so I know that this, rezoning can't right that wrong in no way, but I do think that we need to be cognizant of the way that these neighborhoods were built as they currently are. We're very exclusive. And it's not distant history, it's not theoretical. Many of those families that were able to purchase homes are still living here. And are still, got to live in nice houses for 60 years and are selling them now and making $400,000, $500,000. So I just think that that is an aspect to think about too in supporting this and making our neighborhoods in Ann Arbor more open to all. So thank you, and please vote yes.
Thank you.
Our next caller is Adam Goodman. You have permission to address the commission.
Hi, good evening. My name is Adam Goodman. I'm calling from 400 Virginia Avenue, which is on the west side of Ann Arbor, so not particularly close to Plymouth Road. But I am close to West Stadium, which is one of the corridors that has already been rezoned to TC1. And, I'm here to say a few things, but first of all, the sky has not fallen. West Stadium looks much as it did before. So, as Ms. DeLeo pointed out, TC1 is maybe, if anything, had the effect of slowing development, which, that's not what I think a lot of us ultimately want to see. However, I think in the near term at least, it's okay. Because for me, TC1 is as much about what it prevents as what it allows. What it prevents is the sort of cycle of car-dependent sprawl development that we've locked ourselves into for the last, at least 50 years, probably more like 70 years. What was getting proposed along West Stadium before was things like drive-through banks just one after another, drive-through. In fact, TC1 rezoning didn't happen soon enough. There is yet another drive-through bank under construction right now. However, there was one that was stopped. That is on 2060 West Stadium. That site had previously been considered for drive-through banks and self-storage facilities, things that our community on this side of town clearly did not want. What has been most recently proposed on that site is affordable housing. And I don't know if that proposal is actually going to, get all the way through, get built, but just the fact that this is the conversation we're having now, instead of a drive-through bank, feels like real substantial progress to me. And so I want to see all of the corridor, Plymouth and Washtenaw rezoned, as soon as they can be. And if anything, my only complaint about this whole process has been that it's taken so long to get to where we are now, and we're still not done. So I hope you will advance this rezoning tonight without delay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next caller is phone number ending in 675. You have permission to address the commission. Phone number ending in 675. Are you with us? Perhaps we can circle back to this caller at the end of the queue. Kirk Westfall, you have permission to address the commission for 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. Kirk Westfall, 3505 Charter Place, approximately 1 mile from the nearest proposed TC1 rezoning. I'm just calling to voice my strong support for the city-initiated rezoning as soon as possible. As articulated by a prior caller, I'm particularly in favor in that once it's applied, it will stop the corridor from retrenching further into suburban uses and auto-dominated development. And it will also ensure that any future development, whenever that comes, will meaningfully meet our sustainability, transit, walkability, and mixed-use goals. My only regret about this item, other than it hasn't happened sooner, is that it's not being applied more broadly. For example, just looking at the western part of it, I'm curious why the U-Haul, I think, site wasn't included, or for that matter, why it didn't go all the way down into Lower Town. I am happy that the Green Court folks are looking to ask for TC1 inclusion. I highly recommend that once this zoning is applied and goes through the process. I think that would be a great addition. That part of Green Road is a very frequent transit corridor, not just the AAATA, with that park and ride there and northward, but also all the blue buses that go through that part of town. I would struggle to think of what commercial properties in the city that we actually wouldn't want TC1, given how it tapers down to residential, even shorter than the 55 feet once you get closer to residential, as outlined in the ordinance. And lastly, I just ask you please not to postpone this item because of legal matters between private parties. This shouldn't impact the city's pace of business and can be dealt with between those parties at a later date. Thank you for your consideration, and I urge support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next caller is Michelle Hughes. You have permission to address the commission.
Hi, I'm also in support of this. I'm in support of
anything that gets people walking and biking and stuff like that. Not needing a car is basically the reason that I've lived in Ann Arbor for 20 years. I was going to college in 1998, and I grew up in the East Lansing area. So I was familiar with the Michigan State campus, but then when I came to U of M, I really liked how it was a lot less sprawling, and you could go from places to live to places to do business to places to go to school, and I want more people to have that experience. So we should do this. I've heard it said before, like the reason that a lot of people have such fond memories of their college years is because that's the only time they spent living in a walkable community. We should let people live in a walkable community all the time, not just when they're college students. So yeah, TC won this. Let's do it. Also, I've got another story. I've got a girlfriend that lives up in that area on Green Road, and she has no car, and she lives in an apartment building. And I think a lot of the people in that apartment building have no cars. The bike rack is always just jam-packed full, and there's always tons of parking there that is jam-packed empty. So yeah, I'd like to see more people, more housing for people, less housing for cars, because that's what people actually want. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we are back with caller ending in 675. You can press *6 to unmute yourself. You do have permission to speak if you would like to try addressing the commission. I'm just confirming that the caller is unmuted, should have permission to speak. You can.
Sorry, technical problem. Are you hearing me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Sorry, I had to unmute twice. Brad Fritz calling, 3030 Lexington. So I live about a mile and a half north of Plymouth off Nixon Road. First, let me commend all the planning staff. From everything I've seen, Ms. DeLeo and others are doing very, very thorough work, and I can't say enough good things about that, so I appreciate that. All of this said, I really want to like TC1. I really do. We need more affordability. We need sustainability. Density can help us get there. But there's some devils in the details, and I have 3 I'd like to touch on. 2 I've already mentioned in a written correspondence, so I won't belabor them. The first, there's a lot of moving parts to make this thing work. And particularly, transit. Well, if transit is key, let's get the transit people involved. And we won't get rid of auto transportation. So I believe in our system, we need the engineering department involved. Sustainability depends on building codes. Zoning can't address any of those. But we have a comprehensive plan. Let's do that. Why the rush? It was mentioned, no projects on Stadium have been done yet. To my knowledge, none down in the near the Briarwood area. Let's take our time. A second point. I attended a resident meeting a few weeks ago at the library. There's a mention in the staff report that a summary is included as an attachment. I didn't see that. I hope that others did. My observation was about 3-1 folks opposing this. So please, pay attention to the residents. A third is a personal point. My wife and I both have reduced mobility. We're still able to get around, but we're not going to be riding bikes ever, sadly. That's done. And 15-minute walks are not really realistic either. So TC1 has carrots and sticks for drivers. Let's keep the carrots, but get rid of the sticks, please. I wanted to come up with a satire song from the Music Man to say, you got trouble right here. You got trouble in Ann Arbor City. You got a drive-through in your community. Please, it's not that big a deal. All right, so I thank you for your consideration, and I will relinquish. Bye.
Thank you.
There are no other callers. Vice Chair, if I may, the last caller mentioned a summary of the 10-12 outreach meeting that was referenced in the staff report. It is correct that that was fortunately omitted from the packet. We're going to try to correct that issue right now. And as we've been sitting here, we do have one more caller. It is posted online, I'm hearing, on the website for the TC1 project page.
Thank you, Mix Kelly and Planner DeLeo. We have one more caller who wants to speak. Great.
We do. Just one moment. There are actually two more callers. Brian Chambers, you have permission to address the commission.
Thank you. I am calling in support of TC1 for Plymouth Road, as well as Weston when you get to it. I support it for all of the reasons other callers have already mentioned, but I want to add an additional dimension. The University of Michigan has grown at a compounded growth rate over the past 20 years, just around 2% per year. The student enrollment increased another 2% between 22 and 23 for the start of the fall semester. And when I went to the land use planning session for 2050 that the university is now conducting, one of the leads on the Sasaki team said that they're also running scenarios of continued growth and including that 2% growth metric compounded year over year. So over the past 20 years, at 2% compounded growth, the Ann Arbor campus students and employment increased by 35,600. If that growth continues to 2050, one of the scenarios, it's not a commitment by the U, it'll increase by another 73,000 on campus. That's student enrollment increases of 25,000 and employment of just over 50,000. So we need density, we need walkable density adjacent to transit, adjacent to the university. Otherwise, we're going to be inundated with traffic congestion. So I'm very much in support of this. Even if they grow at only half that rate, there's still going to be an increase of 32,000, which is roughly equivalent to the past 20 years. So we're going to have continued pressure on home prices in Ann Arbor. It's still a go-to address that people want, and building out increased density in all of these TC1 areas is vitally important. I'd also like to make a plug, however, for the downtown core. We've got two regional transit centers, AATA and Amtrak, and I know the comprehensive plan is ongoing and hopefully will address the downtown core. If it's not part of that assignment, I would encourage you to make it one. For regional transit centers, to have two of them in close proximity to each other, you would actually want, in best practices for sustainability and so on purposes, a population of about 10,000 within a quarter to half mile area. There's other properties being considered for hotels. I'd suggest they don't count for residential housing. But we need to really increase housing in the downtown core to make a complete transit-oriented development capacity, especially with the university's projected growth rates. We have to change structurally what and how Ann Arbor operates. We can't ignore the university. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our final caller is Eric Zecker. You have permission to address the commission.
Hello, this is Eric Zecker. You pronounced it perfectly. Thank you very much. I'm a neighbor to the north of this TC1 rezoning. I live on Prairie, 2435 Prairie, if I have to be exact. And I live just a stone's throw north of Plymouth Road here next to an elementary school. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the historic area here. This area was historically developed in the 1960s. Planning departments at that time thought urban revitalization was using urban freeways and more car traffic and easy in, easy out access to strip malls. This area very much reflects that in the single mile between the freeway and the area by Traverwood there. There's like 7 banks with drive-throughs, there's 3 fast foods, there's all the shopping in the area in single-use strip malls with poor bike and pedestrian infrastructure. And despite all of that, this area is still light walkable. A lot of the people that live in the area that are lucky enough to live in homes or apartments or townhouses use the amenities quite frequently. And we don't have everything we want up here. We don't have an ice cream parlor anymore, but we have a lot. And the things that we don't have are mixed use areas. We don't have affordable housing in the area anymore. I was lucky enough to buy in when I could afford it. I couldn't afford it now. I think that's wrong, and I think this area of town deserves better. It's my home, and I love being able to bike or walk to where I need to go, but other people should be able to afford that too. I heard another caller earlier say, why the rush? I think about the most recent developments in this corridor. A Big Boy restaurant was turned into a drive-through Panera. Wendy's is turning into a Taco Bell. An office building at the end of my street is turning into a credit union. So why the rush? I would say we can do better. That's why the rush. People are already redeveloping things. We might as well tell them what we want in the area. And we know from community input that we don't want more banks. We don't want more drive-throughs. We want more livable area. We want a better, walkable, peaceful area up here. More of what we already have. So I really do encourage you to continue on this path with TC1, rezone the area. Don't listen to restrictive covenants between 2 private parties, because that is not the city's business. We should just rezone as our planning staff has designed this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, seeing no other callers or speakers, we will close the public hearing. I will read the proposed motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve amendments to the zoning map, a part of Chapter 55 Unified Development Code, to designate the zoning classification of parcels in the Plymouth Road area as TC1 and designate certain lengths of Plymouth Road as transit corridor street type as shown on the attached ordinance. Moved by Commissioner Survey, seconded by Commissioner Mills. Excuse me. We're in discussion. Is there anybody who would like to kick off our discussion? Commissioner Weich.
All right. Well, thanks so much for the staff presentation as well as for the comments. I think regarding the 5 houses that the in-house commenters spoke about, they are not under consideration for the TC1 zoning. Is that correct?
That is correct. Their current zoning will remain as it is. They are not part of the rezoning.
I don't have an answer for you on what might happen to a retailer who decides to take advantage of TC1 and transform the tenant space that you own, because they'd have to meet the criteria of the zoning, which I believe would be a 2-story if they were doing a substantive remodel, not just like a facade change, but if they were changing square footage or floor plan or something, that would require the second story, and then that would have a direct impact. But that could happen today. It's not a factor of TC1. It could happen depending on what the owner of your space would want to do with that space. So there's not a real clean answer for that, but thank you for bringing the comment for our consideration. I have 2 questions for you, Ms. DeLeo. One is, will your slides, which are not your staff report, be available?
Yes, they will be. I was
Okay.
just waiting for to actually present them tonight.
Great.
And then tomorrow morning, I will post them online.
Thank you so much. And then I don't think you spoke about the affordable housing premium in your height limits.
I did not.
Okay, is there a reason why you did that you would like to share with us?
Just brevity and complexity.
Okay.
But it applies to every single zoning district. So there is an exception to the height limits, and any project in any zoning district can increase their height by 30% if they meet one of 2 criteria, their choice. One, if they are an affordable housing project, and there's a definition for that, or if they are a sustainable development, and there's a definition for that. A sustainable development generally is one that is fully electrified and has solar panels on the roofs. And so, but because it applies to every single zoning district already, the same graphics applies, just change the top numbers, but the proportionality remains the same.
Great, thank you so much.
Commissioner Mills.
I have a couple of questions. First, I wanted to just address one other thing, which is to be clear that zoning and occupancy are separate. So zoning just says kind of what uses, whether that space is rented or owner occupied is not tied to the zoning itself. So that's one of the things to know kind of within our zoning code. The other thing that I think, the rest are questions about changes to the map, or like things in, things out. So deed restrictions are, can you help me understand how that is or is not tied to zoning?
Zoning views deed restrictions as something that you do outside and separate. The zoning is the city regulating the land, and a deed restriction, unless the city puts it there, but a deed restriction is something that a private property owner puts on their own land or somehow negotiates, agrees to put on others. And so that is for an owner of that property, I assume they would need to comply with both, but the city just stays in our lane of zoning and zoning. We do not enforce deed restrictions. We don't generally require them. So this would be something from the property owner's perspective, it would be above and beyond, but we view them as a self-created, self-imposed, and if they would like to continue to abide by them, that is fine.
So one of the things that's in my mind is like that they have that agreement that they entered into. I'm trying to think through, if we do rezone it, does it pose any additional burden or hardship? Like, or is it going to lead to some unintended consequence because of nonconformities that are created?
I can't really say. I don't know exactly what the deed restrictions say. It may make it very hard for someone with a deed restriction on their property to then redevelop per the TC1 standards. And so maybe they can't redevelop, as maybe they'll have to address that. We have run across some, they're not deed restrictions, but we've run across in our workings with TC1 and rezonings, some property owners, commercial property owners saying, I have signed leases where I have promised I would not have such and such a tenant, or I promised I would not develop or put a building in front of this building. And the Planning Commission and City Council's response has been, okay, we'll wait them out then. We'll wait out those leases. So again, with these deed restrictions, I don't know what they exactly say. I don't know if there'll be an unintended consequence, but it's a private, that's a deed restriction that they agree to and they put on, and if they would, it can remain there. And I think the consequence is they may find it hard to redevelop under the TC1 standards.
Would it be possible for you to bring up the map? Because we're talking about, so that we can talk, the deed restriction, make sure that I'm right, is linked to the First Martin email saying we don't want to be rezoned, right? And if you can point out which parcels that it is that we're talking about, and also while you've got east up, I think all of my other questions are about east too.
Okay. Yeah, give me a second. I'm going to pull up just our map, and not the one from the presentation, but this has all the layers, parcel information, zoning, so forth.
I was going to say I've got the zoning map up on my computer too, because that's, yeah, but I couldn't 100% figure out which parcels we were talking about.
Yeah, all right. So the first one I'm going to focus in, I guess, on 2000 Commonwealth, because it's right next door to 2001. I'm going to pull it up, and then I'm going to screen share, because that's probably what everyone wants, right? I do talk to myself after 9 o'clock.
I don't give myself a time limit. I just do it all day long. Sorry, I'll fill this space, and just be vulnerable there.
If I can, whoops, nope. I got one more thing to click on here. Okay. If I move it, it will go away. But here is 2000. You can see the 2000. Is this visible at all?
Yep.
There's a 2000. So here it is. I can take off the zoning for a minute, and it's this orange color that indicates PUD. But here's a, here it is just with, it's got a building there, and it's gray. I can even make it, nope, wrong button. I can do that. But so here is 2000 Commonwealth. And I think that this is
the one to the west of it.
Yeah, I got the parcels are gone. Somehow no, the parcels are there. No, I think it's up here, maybe. It's here. Yeah, it's here. There is 2001 Commonwealth.
So it's Carson's Bistro and the bank.
So part of this is PUD, but it's not the entirety of the PUD. It's currently zoned PUD. But the rest of that corner is all PUD too. And then the other part is the frontage along Plymouth, but that is currently zoned, according to the zoning map, RE.
Right, 2001 is zoned RE, 2000 is zoned PUD.
Got it. So that it is at a tail is better to me than it was in the middle, but I'm welcome other people's thoughts on that part, kind of how to handle that. Actually, related to this though, a question about PUDs, and in your encyclopedic knowledge of all of the TC1 rezonings that we've done so far, how common is it that we have rezoned PUDs?
Well, it's not super common at all. There was one PUD in the West Stadium area that we did rezone, and I think there was one in State and Eisenhower. Generally, it's not common, but I would say this, it's not common to do a city-initiated rezoning either.
Okay. But I mean, there are effectively, we're not rezoning residential. I mean, that's part of our, TC1, we have not been rezoning residential. So I was just trying to think about which are the districts that we tend to include as eligible for rezoning, and so that's what I'm trying to understand here.
Yeah. My encyclopedic knowledge is failing me at this exact moment, but the intent of the TC1 district talks about it is for districts, it is for land that is already zoned for commercial or mixed use or non-residential purposes.
Okay.
And that was our line that we chose to self-impose, that this is a renovation or a transformation of our mixed-use districts. This is not to expand our non-residential footprint in the city. This was just to transform what we will be getting in these districts.
What are currently non-resident, they could be allowed, like residential's allowed in them now, in many of them now. We're just not getting it, and this is to help us.
Correct. All of our mixed-use districts already allow residential.
Right. Okay, great. So I'm on the fence of like not excluding them. I'll be honest, like I would just say keep them in, and their deed restriction is going to do their deed restriction thing. Now that you've got the map though, if you can move a little bit to the east and to the north, I want to talk about there's two more things on my list and then I'll stop. But one is the petition to include property, which when I'm glad that you're looking at the zoning map, because the inclusion is all currently office, or what the petitioner or what somebody who wrote to us wants to include is currently office. But what I found weird is that it creates a little donut around a credit union, which I don't think that we should have a donut around a credit union. And then it leaves just the post office kind of hanging out there as the only office in this stretch. So I would just say, I am not opposed to extending that, especially since they are sharing the parking lot, that they're already connected, at least according to the letter. But I'm not comfortable leaving a donut that is not unzoned, that is on the corridor, that is not part of this. So can you talk us through like the process, or does that make sense to you too? Or think about why these were not included? Yeah.
I'll help you with two parts, but I can't help you with a third.
Okay.
In terms of the process, you have a motion before you that states, words, as shown on the attached ordinance. And so to include, you would amend that motion to say something along the lines of plus parcel with street address 2350 Green Road, or whatever address you'd like to add. Or you can amend the motion to say, except strike line number something something out of the ordinance. So that's the process that you would use. In terms of why it wasn't included, we took our most educated best guess about and hearing the feedback from other TC1 petitions about and where the boundaries ultimately landed for those. And we tried to apply that experience to this proposal, and it is a proposal. And we chose parcels that front or are somehow connected, maybe through a parking lot, to Plymouth Road. And we didn't go many parcels deep past the corridor. Now, there is no necessarily right or wrong answer, but this was the petition that we assembled on behalf of the Planning Commission, and presented, and we received feedback from the public hearings. I didn't mean that. I meant public meetings, and some working sessions, and that's why we did or didn't. I think these parcels up on Green Road, I think you can work your way back through parking. They're north on Green Road, and I think they are interconnected, but they don't have a direct connection to Plymouth. They have a connection to Green, and that was our logic. Like I said, it's not to say that is the only answer that can be arrived. The third part, which I would just have to turn back to the Planning Commission as a whole body. Whatever this is your recommendation for rezoning to City Council, and so you can use that procedure mechanism to add or remove addresses from the ordinance.
Has there been any discussion or we got a letter from Oxford about what's shown in the letter in orange. I'm thinking of it as the orange edition. Has there been any discussion with the community or the credit union that it creates the donut around?
Well, I have not called the credit union myself, and they have not called in.
Okay. So, again, I welcome others' thoughts on that, on the parcels north on Green Road, but personally, I don't think we should do it with the donut. So, then finally, go south on Green Road to Green Court, because now I'm confused from the postponement earlier, and I didn't necessarily see that in the packet. Maybe I missed it. So similarly, can you explain to us the Green Court, the rationale for the postponement and how that links to this? It's abutting this, but I didn't see anything that was like a formal proposal to be included.
Perhaps there has been a communication snafu. To my knowledge, the planning department or myself or the planning manager have not received a letter that said to the effect, "Dear Planning Commission, please include us." I understand there's been talk, and I missed the first 10 minutes of the meeting. Was there any talk? So I don't know if there's been a formal request or not. Formal request. You don't necessarily need a formal request. The Planning Commission as a body is free to amend the motion as they see fit.
I may have misspoke. I did state that earlier in the meeting, but Ms. DeLeo would have the most up-to-date specifics, or Manager Leonard.
Yeah, my understanding is that they essentially intend to ask for that parcel to be included. They have not. We had been striving to get that written request from them by this meeting. That has not been received that I've seen to date. It could happen after the Planning Commission before this progresses to City Council. And I think based on that, that was part of the reason for the postponement, that if this were to be included and rezoned to TC1, they might very well then end that PUD petition. If for some reason the City Council, once they do request, again, we wanted to raise it, if it's included here or not, or if it's included at City Council or not, that could have an outcome. I think it is important to pause that. I would suggest that this is a really unique circumstance because the city is initiating the rezoning. It's frankly relatively easy to add it into that process. That is distinct from what I would never bring two competing rezoning petitions to the Planning Commission on a parcel. But because of this direction from the council and from this being city initiated, it seemed warranted to raise the possibility for this site.
When we discussed the PUD a couple weeks ago, I don't even know how many, whatever. I think that the TC1 makes a whole lot more sense rather than locking it into a PUD that then, yeah. So I'm supportive of that. I'm curious if notice-wise for the process, like if it flags anything else at all in terms of who was mailed postcards and what happens going forward in this, because we did mail out things.
Well, yeah, the proposal on the table, so including the Commonwealth properties from First Martin and excluding the properties on Green from
Oxford to the north and whatever it is to
yes.
the. Yeah.
So that was public hearing notices were sent out to everyone within 300 feet with that list attached, that exact list attached to it. They are mailed to both property owners and resident occupant tenants. And that was factual at the time. That was correct as to what was proposed here for this public hearing. The city council and their staff in the clerk's office mails out public hearing notices for public hearings at the city council. And if they are not the same as the planning commission, then parcels.
They'll be picked up before.
Picked up or dropped, yes.
Okay, Great. So if there's a process to include that, then that makes me feel a whole lot more comfortable going both north and south on Green Road. And I would strongly, I would very much support if there's any other interest in an amendment that would add on all of the Green Court stuff. But again, I don't want to create a donut. I would want to rezone. I would want to extend TC1 to the entirety of the orange block that we are seeing on the screen right now, which I think is all the PUD, right? Or whatever is currently in
The
there.
orange block on the screen on the east side of Green Road is the PUD.
Yeah, and so I know what was before us before was part of it, or I can't remember. Anyway, the whole thing. The whole thing is, I think I would be amenable to extending rezoning to all of that. And similarly, going north, that just seems sensible to me. I just have one more question, and that is, we don't have anything that we haven't had anything built in TC1, but what are you hearing? What is staff hearing? Like, are there proposals working their way through? Are people saying, we don't like it? Like, here's what's wrong with TC1, and we're not gonna build anything? Like, it takes a while to get through the process. So do we think that this is a workable zoning district?
I certainly think it's a workable zoning district. We're hearing a lot of calls, sort of I want to double check the standards. Do I have my concept, do I have my sketch right? We're getting more of those compared to other districts, but the other districts have been around for a lot longer. It's my personal opinion that it's very much corridor by corridor. I think the stadium corridor, as an example, there's not a lot of vacancies on Stadium Boulevard. It's a pretty strong commercial corridor, so I don't think the rezoning mattered. There wasn't much pressure or incentive to redevelop. It's doing well. It's probably making money for its businesses and landowners. And you need that trigger. When things are going well, everybody's happy with the status quo. And I think also we've had actually more inquiries about those concepts. I have got a sketch. Do I have my standards correct for State and Eisenhower? I think there's more vacant land or more undeveloped land in State and Eisenhower. Plymouth Road, the area, it's pretty strong. There aren't too many vacancies either. I would imagine it also would be slow to see development because it's slow now. There's only been a handful of redevelopment proposals under the current zoning designations because it's pretty strong. So I think it will take time. I'm just saying, this is my gut. This is not because I have a whole slew of facts or figures or a crystal ball.
But you're not hearing there's some requirement in TC1 that is actually hindering development. Because we are requiring, right now they could, under current zoning, they could do a 2-story building, they could do a 4-story building, but they.
I'm not hearing the 2-story building part, I'm hearing a little bit of the lot width.
Okay.
Lot width might be a little difficult, and then the block size, especially from some people who are trying to design a very large block, and they're saying, I'm gonna break myself down into, let's say, maybe 4 or 5 blocks. 2 or 3 of them probably can be 250, but I'm left with this piece that's like too big or too small. I think there's some desire for a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of averaging, but that's what, I'm not hearing much about the 2-story requirement, and I'm not hearing, of all the development standards, what I'm hearing more is some of the standards, people seem to wish that there was an average and not a hard line. And that's something that can be talked about in the future.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Dish.
Thank you. First, I want to say this is an amazing staff report, and I thank you very much. The work that staff has been doing on everything related to TC1, the step backs, and this has really been beautiful, and I want to thank you. Also, thank you very much, neighborhood people who have come to ask us questions. So I want to take a stab at addressing Ms. Lee's questions. And, yeah, I see you. Good. You're I can barely see you over the podium, but I thought you stayed. So I want to underscore something that Ms. DeLeo just said, which is that development along this corridor is likely to be slow because it is slow now. And I want to reaffirm that the building that you are in, parts of the building itself, currently, if your landlord wanted to sell that building or develop it themselves, they could build a 55-foot structure. So that's like a 4-story-ish, right? If they wanted to do that, they could already do it. So the rezoning will make parts of that building possible. It'll give an extra 2 stories probably for parts of that building. And then parts of the parking lot could go as high as 120 feet. And so I think sometimes it's an assumption that when we permit greater height, we are creating wealth and we are adding value. Now, if there were a desire to maximize value through greater height, like I said, 55 feet is already permitted, and we're not seeing your landlord selling the building and wanting to develop it in those terms. Rezoning at TC1, what effect does it have? Well, it does permit greater height, but it makes in some ways it makes development more expensive than currently because of the parking restrictions, right? It does not allow for the kind of surface parking that's there. And so if you were going to have a taller building, you are going to need more parking, especially if it's mixed use. And that means that you are going to have to build parking, structured parking, either underneath or somehow inside your building, and that's expensive. So we are adding height, which possibly adds wealth, but we are then taking some of that wealth back by making the parking more expensive. So I don't have a crystal ball. I know that building, if I'm remembering right, was built in '62. I think so, from the list of properties. And if I'm wrong, correct me. And if I'm wrong by a decade. It'd be 70. But I think it's '62. So it's not the youngest building in the world, but it is working very well. It has a number of very vibrant small businesses. And so I do not know what the calculus your landlord might be making. I don't know what that would be. And so I understand your concerns about what could happen if the structure that you are in were sold and redeveloped. The other thing to know is that just as has happened at the very front edge of Plymouth, where the Starbucks and the apothecary shop are, this is something that TC1 makes easier, that you can develop in a space without demolishing what's already there. There's a lot of parking lot there that if someone wanted to develop, they could use it without destroying the current mall with all the buildings that are there. It's a little odd. It would be a little odd because it's sort of parking between the bank and those other shops. But nonetheless, I'm just trying to run with you all the scenarios that are possible. And there's absolutely nothing I can say to reassure you that you have nothing to worry about. But my sense, too, is that redevelopment that might involve displacing all of those buildings would not happen overnight, immediately, but it's also a discussion that y'all could try to have with your landlord. But again, if that person were interested in developing to a greater height, they already could, and they haven't made that move. So I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself, but I want to be clear. Okay, I'm really glad Commissioner Mills asked the questions about the inclusions and the exclusions. In terms of the inclusions, the inclusion on green that would create the donut if we did it exactly as it were asked for would involve repurposing office space, correct? Am I correct in that? is it currently zoned office and occupied by office? Well, we want to encourage that. So I feel like I'd like to have us include that. And again, correct me if I'm misunderstanding something, but my understanding of TC1 is that it is a district that we are applying and fixing in place in some parts of the city, but can also be done by request. So if we have a request at the same time as we are fixing that, applying that area, why don't we just incorporate it rather than making somebody go through a cumbersome request process? You know, somebody who has it sounded like, from the way Mr. Chang was talking about it, a sort of historically very curious and unique PUD, but I don't know that we want to just keep it because it's it's historically very interesting and curious. Why don't we give it an available zoning decision, which is zoning designation, which is what we prefer. We don't prefer to have PUDs when we have a zoning designation that can accomplish the same purposes. So I would be happy with those inclusions. From Ms. DeLeo's response about deed restrictions and stuff, it doesn't sound like we're hurting anything by rezoning to TC1. We may not get anything out of it, but it doesn't sound like we kind of don't have any business in those deed restrictions. And so it doesn't sound like our action affects them. And if I am missing something that's more nuanced, which is very often the case, please add nuance. I always appreciate that.
Commissioner Sauvé.
Finally, we're here. Thank you for bringing this. I guess relative to the in-out, how I kind of maybe filter a little differently is things asking to be in, donut or not, it reduces the burden on a property owner relative to requesting rezoning. So if we do not include it, they could still request rezoning to TC1 and create a donut. Well, requiring a lot more front-end process and cost that gets rolled up into the tenants. So I'm actually okay with donut because it's less cost directed then to the end user. So in thumbs up how requested, the out, I will read the first two clauses of the deed restriction because they're specific about these two parcels. The owner's land on the east side of the Commonwealth Boulevard shall be rezoned to office, except for the first lot off of Plymouth, which shall be rezoned to PUD. And there's a little bit more. And then the other says the only property of the owner to be rezoned on the west side of Commonwealth be the first lot, which will be rezoned to office. So the only thing I read in there that can create sticky points is that the deed restriction requires the owner to zone these things PUD in office, which means we may see these things come back for a request to rezone them from TC1 back into PUD. So like that's just a condition that we may see that, I guess, similar to the inn, if there's potential for development still within those, cool, like to get more stuff out of them as they're zoned, but it sounds like there's no potential for development if they get rezoned, at least on my personal reading of this thing. So I'm really kind of looking at it and it's like, what is site plan light? When are we, right? Which is like pre-rezoning or not on some of these things to reduce steps in a development process. And so that's just kind of my filter. It helps that there's a couple more steps in this process when it goes to city council for all of these property owners to have further discussions, because it does feel like all of these came within the last week. And so in all letters, if they were included or excluded at this time, conversations can continue. So I'm not going to lose sleep over where it lands in either case here. But that would just be kind of my filter of the reading and where the opportunities and the hardships lie for each of those properties. But overall, I look forward to welcoming hopefully more residents with new development here. Maybe they be renters or owners, because both are part of our community and both are residents.
Commissioner Weatherby.
So I wasn't here for the previous TC1, and I don't want to make this wicket stickier, but when I look at some of these spaces, like all of Commonwealth, is there a reason that all of Commonwealth isn't TC1? And then there's, if we go back to the central, like where the Google building is there a reason that, I'm looking at the map and pointing, you can't see what I'm pointing at, but, you know, we already have like where there's office or parking, and they're ringed by residential or streets. Is there a reason that I think you explained that because they connected to the main street, but like it seems like we're leaving little bits of office, or that actually is going to be more confusing moving forward because it's not TC1, but it's like the one building, or there are 3 buildings that aren't, but most of them are, or everything across the street is TC1, but these are office. And it seems like in all of these places, there's a pretty distinct cutoff, which is either residential or the main road, that we could kind of, instead of having a line, it would be more of a blob. And I'm just, like, I think my preference, because I think it gets confusing when there's office for one building, and then the next building is TC1, and then the building after that is parking, or like, that having some sort of more distinct areas. It seemed like the east side on Green, north and south, Commonwealth, and then the little strip between Huron Parkway and Traverwood down to Plymouth, that they're pretty distinct areas that could all be TC1, in my opinion. But I don't know if that just makes this more complicated and as we move forward. But I would be very comfortable including more things in the TC1 designation. So.
Any other comments? Oh, sorry, were you flagging me? I missed your subtle cue.
Commissioner Weiss knows I unmuted myself. It's just a point of clarification. I had said that the public meeting summary was posted online, and that was wrong. The frequently asked questions document is on the website. The Planning Commission, if I have this correct, we have since posted the meeting summary to the packet, and been refreshed. So, and I believe you've been emailed a link. So to anyone watching, if you go use our agenda service, you'll see that document as well. And it may or may not have been also, while I'm talking, published to the website. But no matter, first thing tomorrow morning, the slide deck, and if needed, the public meeting summary will be posted to the project website. And like I said, the packet links have already been refreshed.
Thank you. Are there any other comments for discussion? So I'm trying to read the table in terms of this inclusion-exclusion question. It seems like there are a couple proposals on the table. Maybe a follow-up question to what you were saying, Commissioner Sauvé. My understanding is that what Commissioner Mills was proposing would be to include the 2 parcels that Oxford has requested on Green Road, and also include the parcel that we did not receive a request for. So I think that would meet your desires, Commissioner Sauvé, to include Oxford's parcels as a way of making it less burdensome for them to rezone by including it in the city-initiated zoning. Okay. So that, are Are there any objections to including those 3 parcels then? And Ms. DeLeo, you're confirming that there's nothing out of sorts in terms of process and notification to include this 3rd parcel on Green that we did not receive a formal request for inclusion?
Right, that's the public hearing and the deliberation process, is that you are not bound by what is exactly in front of you. You are free to amend the motion, any motion.
Great. Maybe while I'm talking, somebody could track down the address for that so that when it comes time to do it, can you let me know what that is?
Yep. The address for that piece up on Green Road is 2400 Green Road.
Okay.
And I've got the parcel ID number.
Do you think I need to read that out loud officially?
I don't think so.
Okay, so I'm going to read the 3 street, when it comes time, the 3 street addresses.
Yes.
Okay. And then in terms of Green Court, is there anybody who wants to discuss further or is opposed to including the property on Green Court? Commissioner Mills.
So I just pulled up the UDC again and just want to make sure in our intent statement or our purpose statement, just want to be clear, it doesn't list PUDs. It says this district may replace ORE, ORL, CB1 through CB3, whatever. It should only replace other zoning designations in unique and rare circumstances when another zoning district is entirely surrounded by the specifically mentioned districts. So to your point, Commissioner Weatherby, that's what caused me to look this up. What were our stipulations? Because what we said before was and then the second thing is that all parcels zoned TC1 should be no more than a half a mile from a transit stop. And on the south side, those parcels totally meet that. It's right across the street from a park and ride. It's great. I don't know about the Google parcel that you're talking about in particular. I think so. I mean, it's hard to be more than a half a mile from transit stop in Ann Arbor. But I just thought I would bring that up. I think that TC1 is the best district that we got for this, what is currently a PUD that wants to be a new kind of PUD. I will say that. I just want to remind us of the purpose statement that we have. And I don't think that this is going to surround it. It doesn't make sense to go beyond it. Maybe this is a rare circumstance in that it is initiated, city initiated. I don't know. I don't know if staff has any guidance. That we were specifically talking about the PUD on the south side, yeah.
Yeah, so, if you are interested in extending that for those reasons, I would recommend that you add the parcels. Again, the geography being proposed here was in response to the council direction. We discussed the geography with the Planning Commission based on an emphasis on the Plymouth Road corridor in this sense. We have had other property, for example, we've had one other property in the stadium area that was off of the corridor, and applying some of the transit-centric design standards of that seemed less applicable when it was sort of an island parcel in that area sort of between Maple and Stadium that didn't have frontage on either of those corridors. I think the other setback ordinance that you've already put forth, the council will help address some of that, so I have frankly less concern about that for these parcels. And to some of the other discussion, it continues the conversation on them. I would, however, suggest that you omit the Alterum property that is being purchased by the University of Michigan and recommend that be zone PL.
Okay. Like right now? Wouldn't that be a separate motion?
Well, either, I would just suggest maybe omitting it or making that recommendation as a rezoning of that PUD because long-term, that is traditionally the treatment of University of Michigan-owned property is zone PL. And so while we're at it, maybe that's a cleanup we could do while we're looking at that PUD district.
Or we could ask the university to come before us and request that.
You could ask them. They will not. They don't have to.
I would need some assistance. Right now, I only have one address for this whole 4-part thing, 3520 Green Court. So maybe we need to define that further so that we could exclude the Alterum building.
The parcel from Alterum that U of M is purchasing, is that the vacant one?
No, the
No,
one
it's the
south of that.
Okay, got it.
That's.
You'll have to.
I think it's 3520 Green is the property that they're purchasing.
The 4 parcels that make Green Court are an unaddressed Green Court, and I do have the parcel ID number ending in 008. And then it includes 3520, 3600, and 3550 Green Court. So of those 4, one is parcel ID number ending in 008, and then 1600 and 3550, but it sounds that we will be excluding 3520.
In that PUD square, it's not 100% a square, but in it, we're talking about the southwest corner that is being excluded now. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So everything around it, that makes sense.
I'm sorry, Planner Leo, so
Included
we are
in the rezoning.
including, there are
3
5
parcels that were-
No, there are 5 parcels total that make up this block. I see 5. One,
4. Yep, there are 5.
thank you.
Oh,
We
because
are-
there's 3 on the north side.
We are excluding 3520 Green Court, and we are
In
including,
favor of adding 3535.
we are adding 3535, 3550, 3600, and the parcel ID ending in 008. Maybe I'll just I'll give you a minute and then maybe ask for confirmation of that. Do you want me to tell you again, or were you?
Well, it sounds to me, do you want all of them or just Green Court?
I just want the 4 in Green Court that we are including.
All right. We are including 3535 Green Court, 3550 Green Court, and 3600 Green Court. And Green Court parcel ID number 090923-100-008.
So I'm just going to say ending in 008. Thank you so much. I have that up here, yeah. Are there any other amendments to the motion that I missed? Commissioner Sauvé.
Maybe just for a point of clarification, are we excluding in the rezoning the U of M property, or are we including but adding a zoning district to the rezoning package?
The amendment on the table, we can amend the amendment. The amendment on the table would be to include the 4 parcels in that block that are not owned by U of M, and to exclude the U of M parcel, which we assume will be rezoned to public land at some future date.
Yeah, that'd be fine. You could also add an additional amendment to also recommend rezoning of 3520 Green Court to public land, but we have some other cleanup that we have to do in that regard, so I think we could include that.
I will follow the body's lead, but for me, that seems out of place with the TC1 motion.
So I would just recommend excluding that address for now.
Does that make sense, Commissioner Sauvé? Okay, Commissioner Mills.
All this talk of public land makes me wonder about the post office. If we can go back up Green Road for just a hot minute, because now that is the only office left on Green Road. And it's federal. So how does that work?
Oh,
Are they subject to zoning?
So the federal government is not. And we have propose the rezoning of another federal property in this to TC1. I'm trying to, I can't speculate of the likelihood of a federal property being made available for redevelopment at a pace relative to the University of Michigan. But I might actually guess that it's more likely. So it's federally owned. It could, whatever you zone it, they're not subject to. However, if you wanted to rezone that to TC1, as is being proposed, the EPA laboratory along this corridor, that would restrict it should that ever change hands.
I would vote for its inclusion. Okay. So if we can get the address for that too.
I'll look that one up. I was just at our habits, our longstanding habits have regarding the PL zoning is land owned by the city, whether it be a city facility like the water treatment plant or parks. Land owned by the county and land owned by the state in the form of the University of Michigan, and land owned by the schools has been zoned PL. We don't historically, for whatever reason, zone land that is owned by the federal government, and there is some. U.S. post offices are some, the EPA labs are some. We zone them a traditional zoning district. They are not subject to zoning, but it is sort of the message that we send on the zoning map, and that's what we like the zoning map to be clear about what is subject to zoning and what is not. And so even though it's not zone PL, the zoning applicability is based on ownership.
Super.
I'll get that address for you.
And for the zoning nerds out there, like, this is like planning law in terms of lower levels of government regulating higher levels of government. We don't get to talk about that very much, but it's fun. It's also like, yeah.
Any other amendments to know about before I formally propose these? Mr. Leonard, no? Commissioner Dish brought the chocolate.
Thank you for the chocolate.
3,000, thank you.
So Alexis, do you have, my understanding is I just want to make sure that I'm clear, adding Oxford properties as requested, adding the credit union, adding 4 parcels on Green Court.
Adding the post office.
And the post office. Parcel number 090914-100-436.
Also known as 3,000 Green Road?
Doesn't say that, but.
Okay. So I'm going to move then formally. Oh, Commissioner Mills.
I'm just going back, and it's been a while, it's been a minute since we did like other TC1, all this batch, and it's the petitioner asking to be excluded. I can't think of this in the past. And again, particularly if we have in our packet stuff that suggests to us that in order to uphold their thing, they're going to have to come back and ask to be rezoned. It seems to me like it's like if they said don't rezone me, and we know why they're saying this, it seems like maybe we should exclude the properties that ask to not be included, the First Martin properties.
I understand what you're saying, and also it seems like the deed restriction is illegal, or I don't know if that's the right word. You can't have a deed restriction that requires you to zone something a certain way because it's not up to the property owner to do so. Right? So I don't know, it's also odd for us to comply with an improper deed restriction or reciprocal covenant. But
because also if they come back to us, they can't say, I mean, if they come back to us to ask for rezoning,
But they literally
Right.
don't have any control over it, so how can they
Right.
sign a contract saying that they will do it? They can only say that they will try.
Yeah.
I don't, okay. Commissioner Sauvé, I didn't know if your intention in calling our attention to that was that you thought we should act on that, or you just wanted us to know it?
I mean, it has consequences in either direction. It is all I kind of point out. And so it's trying to measure the lesser of the two evils of like what our options are. I think this one we have some kind of legal binding additional stuff that we can reference. I would be very hesitant relative to removing a request because the plan could be, I'm planning a drive-through or something else. It doesn't seem like that's the case, and within the PUD or office, it would be a special exception, which could easily be denied for drive-through specifically. But it does leave a weird extra parcel also to the south. But I think in the end, I'm also just measuring it on process and cost. And then if we do include it, we may add processing cost. Even if it's not granted, that cost will get rolled up somewhere in a future development of that project. And we know where that cost goes. And it's to who occupies these properties. And so the objective for housing is to maybe reduce some of those costs and hope that it reduces the overall cost of housing. So, I mean, I'm open to both. This is not the end table. I just kind of raise it more than anything. So I'm comfortable in either direction.
Thank you. Those are good points. Although it can't be developed into housing as it currently stands. The deed restriction restricts it from being housing anyway.
It restricts it from not being zoned office or PUD and a certain size.
There's nothing in the deed restriction that says it can't be housing?
That's my
Okay.
zoned office.
Not used, yeah.
There's zoning and there's use.
Commissioner Weiss?
Ms. DeLeo, could you remind me, didn't we have a petitioner in Stadium who requested exclusion? Wasn't it Bixmore in Maple Village?
Yes.
And
Brixmore asked to be excluded, but they were included.
But we included them even though they asked to be excluded.
Yeah, and there was also a property, I feel like on Collingwood,
Yep.
that asked to be included.
Yep.
And they were not included.
Okay. So I move to amend our motion. Right now it says, last phrase, as shown on the attached ordinance. I move that we amend that to say, as shown on the attached ordinance, and the following parcels: 3,000 Green Road, 2350 Green Road, 2400 Green Road, and 2500/2600 Green Road, and 3535 Green Court, 3550 Green Court, 3600 Green Court, and the parcel ID ending in 008, which is also on Green Court and currently undeveloped. Can I get anybody to second that motion? Seconded by Commissioner Weiss. Is there a discussion of the amendment? Ms. Kelly, would you like us to do a roll call vote on the amendment to the motion, or a voice vote?
I think either would be appropriate.
All right, we'll do a voice vote on the amendment to the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion carries. So we're back in discussion of the amended motion. Any further comments? All right, I believe we're ready for a roll call vote.
On the amended motion, Commissioner Abrams.
Yes.
Commissioner Weiss.
Yes.
Commissioner Sauvé.
Yes.
Councilmember Dish.
Yes.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Commissioner Mills.
Yes.
Commissioner Weatherby.
Yes.
That carries.
Thank you. We will give a moment to Commissioner Lee to rejoin the body. Should we take a 2-minute break, a 3-minute break? Okay, we'll reconvene at 9:55.
I'm calling us back to order. Thanks, guys. We're moving on to section 11, public comment. This is a second opportunity for persons to speak up to 3 minutes about any issue that is not listed as a public hearing on this agenda. We'll first call on individuals present to address the commission, then remote participants. And so to speak during this public hearing remotely, please press *9. If listening by phone, please use the raise hand feature if viewing through the web link. For phone access, please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand and using the last 3 digits of the phone number or by name if available. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. So when speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any background noises so that we can hear you clearly. And for either method, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anyone present that would like to speak at this time? Music.
Actually, I have a few random comments. Thanks, Commissioner Lee.
Yeah.
So the 3520 Green Road additions to the TC1 district, I understand why you did it. It's much cleaner. But we were on the verge of getting an electrification commitment in this new PUD, and now that's off the table. So I'm disappointed. And it gets to my issues with TC1 to begin with, and the lack of any kind of comprehensive approach to climate on the part of the city. It reminds me on the international level of the Paris Climate Agreement. Everyone makes these commitments, but none of them are required, so everyone ignores them. We have an 820 plan, but it's clearly failing for the same reason. So yeah, the whole world is failing at climate, so why should we be different? Well, maybe I'm naive, but I thought maybe we would be. But now I've pretty much lost hope. I'm not blaming you guys. You've got to do what you've got to do regarding enforcing the UDC, and those are your criteria, but something has to happen here. On the, you're not timing me. You're giving me unlimited time here? Oh, okay. Gotcha. Okay. Anyway, on Sartorius, on 30, just to clarify my comments about the public subsidy, my understanding was that the brownfield plan was $2.7 million, and that $2.6 million of that was for non-environmental costs. So I was counting that $2.6 million. I was counting the city's 12-year 50% tax abatement, which was never quantified, but looking at the tax tables, to me, I was guessing around $3 million, and then the state gave them a $1.2 million grant. So I think that comes to like $6.8 million. But I could be wrong about the $3 million. That's just my best guess. But to Commissioner White's comment that maybe this should be included in staff reports, I agree. For context, we keep hearing from developers like the one tonight about all the extra things they're doing on top of the city requirements. Well, we should hear about what extra things the city is doing for them. But we don't see that in the staff report, and we have, you depend on amateurs like me to bring you up to date on that. We saw that also with the Robertson Brothers development, where I don't know how many times Mr. Lundgren claimed credit for the electrification of the 164 single-family homes on that. Well, in fact, the city's paying for that through the brownfield plan, $2.9 million combined for those heat pumps, plus solar panels on the clubhouse and the solar streetlights. So that should have been in the staff report. So we can call the bluff of some of these developers who are claiming extra credit for things that we, the taxpayers, are footing the bill for. So those are my comments. Thank you for all your work and for tolerating my constant presence here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garber. Is there anyone that would like to address the commission remotely? Thank you. And for what it's worth, thank you for your civic service and in your engagement. Moving on to section 12, is there any commission proposed business? Commissioner White.
Okay, I didn't have this when we were talking about the research drive in front of me. I knew it was in the UDC, I just didn't know where it was. So I have potentially 2 requests. I guess I'll start with a request, and then you all can tell me what the result of that request is. 5.13.4, RE Research District, subsection B, 5 lists emissions as a health consideration when approving site plans that are in that district. What does that mean, if not the contribution to our climate change? And then it's repeated in 5.13.5, ORL Office and Research, subsection B.6. So I would love to know, do those two statements have meaning? And if they have meaning, how should we consider that meaning? Also in the UDC, so this is in the same request, it says that site plans that come before the Planning Commission, the development will not have a detrimental impact or effect on the public health, safety, or welfare of our community. Again, my question is, does that statement have meaning? So, and if it does, how then should we consider that? And you were not here, Mr. Leonard, when Mix Kelly and I had this conversation, because I mentioned that I've brought this up before, and you and I have exchanged words about it, but we don't have to do it tonight. But I would like to understand how these 3 points that sit within the UDC would be able, or how we should interpret them as we're approving site plans. And if they don't actually mean what it appears that it means on its plain reading, then there should be some clarification of how we should apply it, or we should queue it up for removal. Because I think, to me, it just feels disingenuous to approve something that I know is going to have a detrimental impact on the climate and say that it does not. So those are my requests based on it. And I didn't have it at the time that we were in the discussion, but had I had it, I could have raised it and asked for a postponement.
So public health, safety, and welfare is a basis for police power laws. That is also zoning is a police power law. The way you define what public health, safety, and welfare is by the adoption of ordinance standards and applying development to meet those standards. It is not a tagline that can be invoked to say that I don't think it meets these standards and therefore I think this is inappropriate. Public health, safety, and welfare is the reason that we create laws to govern how development happens. We answer what that means by the adoption of the standards in our UDC and other codes throughout the city. So in the past, there have been communities, and in the past we have invoked that as a finding. That is not a finding. That is the basis why we enact ordinances and standards and measure developments to those standards. As for your first question, I don't know what that's intended to be air quality. We can work on trying to answer that. My initial thought is that is language that has probably existed in this code since the 50s and it's been pulled forward. So, but I can try to do our best to answer what that means. So.
And specifically for me, it's the emissions of air pollution. That's what we have written in our code. And they're in the 2 districts, and they were in the 2 districts that we were considering tonight. So it was an appropriate set of questions that we had for this petitioner, except I don't know how, when you say it's the way that we do the police powers, then my expectation then would be there's a city department that makes a judgment on the emissions of the air pollution, and then that comes to us and says, it meets this standard, so it can go forward. If you're saying that we don't have the ability at the table to restrict something. Otherwise, we should put it on our work plan to have it removed if it doesn't have an enforceability in the code.
Thank you for bringing that up, and I do think that there's actually some reasonable basis to take a look at that one. You're absolutely right. B5, emissions of air pollution shall not be detrimental to public welfare. So I think that's definitely something that we should discuss further. Aside from that, do we have any other commission proposed business? Seeing none, I'm going to move to adjourn. Seconded by Councilmember Dish. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.